Good morning, viewers, and welcome to another edition of the Strategic Management Program, where we look at leadership, strategy, and management. Today, we'll be looking at police reforms, youth protests, leadership, and communication. With me is our regular guest, Mr. John Wesey, a strategic management consultant and CEO of Psyntech Nigeria Limited. Nice to have you, Mr. John Wesey, on the program.
Thank you, Otto. Nice to be.
Yes, and congratulations, you just concluded your Leadership Learning and Development Network International Conference, LDNI, and of course, we're looking at building new pathways. But let's begin with that. What has this taught those in leadership and management in terms of how to drive reforms that impact society, particularly when we expect timelines to achieve things, looking at the issue of the police reforms and how the delays in reforming units like FSARS caused a lot of challenges because of the excesses, extrajudicial killings, and brutalities recorded so far?
Thank you, Otto. I think, firstly, let me thank ProShare and WebTV, who were partners with us, our media partners, and even much more for the just concluded Champions of Talent Development conference. That conference that finished a few days ago is actually still on, especially if you subscribed.
Yeah.
It was the first time such a talent development conference was going to take place in Africa. We had almost about 15 or 16 countries that subscribed to that event. We had almost about 700 participants that came. If you recall the theme, the theme was building new pathways. And all of a sudden, as if we are predicting, or like they say in some religious sects, as if we are prophesying,
Yes.
what was going to happen. Yeah, as if we are prophesying. Now, the entire program focused on how do we build new pathways in developing, managing, and growing talents. How do we respond to this? So that event came out with unique insights, and I still encourage people to go and subscribe. The closing speech by Brian Cumbry was talking about product or input substitution. So building new pathways with respect to what we are going through now is telling us we need to refocus the agenda on how our consumption pattern should look inward.
Yeah.
That's what. Two, we need to understand what learning agility is, which was what Ndubisi Ekekwe was talking about.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Three, we also talk about we need to see that to grow, you need to get people to own the process.
Yeah.
To own the process. That's what we are hoping that this conference is able to bring, and kind of prophesying what was going to happen. Now, if we look at all the elements that the conference focused on, what it did tell us was we could do better. And we will do better by improving our engagement.
Yes.
By improving our engagement with all stakeholders, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
The people to be developed, the people developing them, the channels, the tools, the methodologies by which we use in developing our people, we need to change that.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, Otto, we have begun by building new pathways. It then means the way we'll engage, the tools we use must change. As we interact with each stakeholders, as we also develop talent and grow our businesses as the case may be.
Yes.
Thank you.
This has been the gap over the years. So if you have complaints or harassment, like what happened in the FSARS groups or any police formation, you needed somewhere to complain to resolve this thing, to take steps. This had been lacking, and now the need for the PSC to come on board is critical. Don't you think that we should push further the role of the PSC, empower them more to ensure that these reforms take its due course?
Thank you, Otto. See, we must not go beyond what the PSC should do. The PSC is an advisory body. The PSC is a policy formulating body. The PSC does not execute, but the PSC can set up an independent performance management unit, whatever they want to call it. Okay, I want to speak in my language. Yes, I want to speak in my language. The PSC can set an independent performance management unit to measure all the appropriate metrics of the Nigerian Police Force. They can do that, right? They're a policy monitoring body. All they need to do is issue out that policy and fund it. That's one. Two. However, why things have been this way is because we have an elitist system that has isolated itself, or a group of elites, or which you want to call people in establishments, that have isolated themselves from the reality of the change of society. And I have been sharing this with a couple of friends of mine, okay? They are the ones in governance today, okay? So, and I've been telling them, and not just myself, a lot of people have been telling them, the rules of engagement of leadership today has changed. Leadership must be inclusive. Not just that leadership must be inclusive. What comes with inclusivity, the benefit of inclusivity is trust, which you mentioned. We have, in public governance, we have lost the trust of our citizens. And that's because we are still governing, or those in governance, or those in leadership are still governing with a mindset of the 60s and of the 70s. For the love of Mike, we are in another century. So it's a mindset shift that needs to take place so that the appropriate structures to be put in place to help whatever new system is established, is effectual. First, they are not serving themselves, they are serving the people. That mindset must be there. They are not doing us any favor. Okay? The moment they have the mindset of service and serving very well, effectively, for corporate growth of the entire system, you understand that the metrics that they use in measuring their performance will change. Then the leadership mindset will also change. Then the leadership actions will say, you see, the moment a man's mind can be transformed, every other thing is possible. So we may sit here from now to tomorrow, and talk about this thing. They are not doing us any favor. And our people in governance today, this select group of people who are elites, unfortunately, need to smell the coffee that things have changed. They need to smell the coffee. It's real. Things have changed. So, and it's not just in the police, it's in both in the private and the public sector. Every strata of society. So our thoughts, the way we relate, must change. This toga that we have carried is no longer tenable. And that's why you find what is happening. For some of us, these protests or this conversation, people may see it as protest. No, it has now turned to, it's actually a conversation. We forced this mode. The system forced this mode out of the citizens to respond to them. So that's exactly what I think has happened. So it doesn't matter. The PSC, yes, they are an advisory policy setting, but they can set up an independent body under their, under their own purview, independent, that monitors what the police force is doing, because the police is to execute everything that they are telling them to do. So don't forget that. We can't go outside of the mandate of the PSC.
Definitely, definitely. And I must chip in that the LDNI will have a role too to play in terms of orientation, engaging further, because it's like you said, building new pathways. But quickly, in just a few minutes as we begin to wind down, the protest has been on for 2 weeks, and there are concerns because of blocking some of the queues. As I speak to you now, people in Lagos, there's a lot of gridlock movement around. I mean, in Abuja, some parts also, there's been protests across the country. So School of Thought say, yes, the protest is good, but they're blocking routes where people want to move around, and it can be challenging. What would you be saying to those in this protest at this time? Because the vice president has spoken extensively, the president spoke briefly, the IGP, every key stakeholder in government, the Senate, National Assembly, have responded and said, we hear you and we are committed to reforming the police to serve the country better. From the part of the protesters and then from the part of the leadership, how can we come to common ground to move the nation forward? Because there are concerns that if it continues like this, we may really be heading for a socio-political crisis.
We're already in a socio-political crisis. We're already in a socio-political crisis.
Okay.
So we're already there. But let me respond in a number of layers. First of all, I want to thank the Vice President for what he said, all right? It may not be deep enough. You see, the moment you have lost trust, because you have antecedents of non-performance, all right? You need to go the extra mile, bending backward, all right? Taking steps you have never taken before to gain trust back. That's what we need to do. Now, however they're going to do that, I don't know, okay? I'm sure a number of eggheads are putting their thoughts together to find a way to engage these people. Yeah. See, this is a generation, and with by the age of privilege, one has been able to mentor, and we are still mentoring, coaching and teaching and training. These are young men and women, all right, who know what they're talking about.
Yes.
But they may not have the systemic implication, the depth. Okay, what they are seeing is an iceberg. It's like an iceberg. The systemic issues are really still under. But all we are saying is we don't care. There are low-hanging fruits. It's a change management situation, which we should deploy, okay, change management approach to support or help in managing the crisis, as it were. Yes. Now, what are the requests that these people are asking? It is not for their benefit. It is for all of our benefits and generation that are what? Unborn. So what I think everybody is doing is, let's see action. The disruptions about movement all over the country, the disruption about movement all over the country is regrettable, but it's an essential factor for action. The reason is because we have history of our government officials, of our leaders not performing. So that's the issue. So when they see critical steps being taken, all right, the barricades that are being put, okay, these same people will create passage. So a friend of mine was telling me it took him 9 hours from Ibadan to Lagos yesterday. 9 hours. Yeah. He said why the 9 hours was grueling, because they narrowed everything to one lane. Not only one lane, they will allow a set of vehicles to pass and close it for another 10 minutes and ask them to come down and ask people to trek. You see, these people are being very creative in order to gain attention. And because they've seen how change has happened in other climes. So they are thinking on their feet. Above all, where do these guys meet? Yeah. Do you know where they meet? Can you guess?
Digital platforms.
Thank you, sir. They meet on WhatsApp. Yeah. They meet on Telegram. Yeah. They meet on Snapchat. They meet
Twitter.
in all of these groups.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
meet in all of these social groups. Are you getting my point? So before they come out, the plan of execution has already been what? Defined. You see the kind of people we are trying to lead. They are heads and steps ahead of us in managing this. So the government and all the people who are trying to engage them must bear this in mind. These guys are not meeting, they're not convoking in any physical space. They are convoking where? In cloud.
Yeah.
In different groups in all the social media platforms. So they understand what to do. So that's where these exchanges are taking place. So for you to now respond to them, you've got to find the best way in transparency and in with concrete step that is seen being taken. So once this is done, you will discover that they themselves, although this money, people are willingly donating across the world.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about? So these are the things we need. So yes, it is painful that we are all going through this. If we go through this for a season and there is respite for our people and even for the police force, members of the police force themselves, it's for the benefit of every one of us. We've been oppressed. Like I used to say, we've been oppressed, suppressed, depressed, and abused.
Yeah.
It cannot continue. So we want to see a society where people feel they can freely express themselves. Not only that, they have the freedom to achieve whatever dreams that they have. But if our younger ones and our children are being killed the way they are being slaughtered by a group of people, supported by a select few elites who are benefiting from a skewed system, what do you expect? So that's what's happening. So the rules of engagement must change. Government must set up a multilateral platform, but carefully coordinated with only one message, with only one goal. That's where the challenge is. So government thought should be, what should be the message to our citizens? Multilateral stakeholders thinking, but with only one message. But with what? Multilateral approach to engage these people. So it requires deep thinking, all right, with openness, so that people can get. So that's what we need to do. That's what the government needs to do, you know, and everybody supporting the government, including our humble self. You mentioned the LDNI. Yeah. We will be glad. Where the LDNI will have far more impact is to help in developing the curriculum. The way you train today, you are training adults, but the way we train them in the training schools, in all of our military and paramilitary schools, it's like we are training children. No, the world has changed. These guys are adults already. So there are adult learning techniques, you know, that needs to, so that's where the LDNI is going to be of superior impact. Yes, when we are invited. We'll help them design the curriculum, you know, and however it should be, and the instructional design, like we call it. So that's what we're going to do when we are invited.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. John Wesey, for the time. And definitely we hope that the LDNI will be integrated also to help in terms of the orientation for the police force, because like you rightly said, an independent performance management system is also needed to see how each formations are creating value and serving the nation better. Thank you once again, Mr. John Wesey, for the time.
Thank you always. It's a privilege for me, and have a wonderful weekend.
And that'll be all for this edition of the Strategic Management Program. You can join our website, www.prochange.com, to watch our videos of Strategic Management Program, and of course, read the stories and reports around leadership and management, and also follow Mr. Wesey on Twitter at John Wesey on his thoughts around leadership as it affects the country. So we come your way again next weekend to discuss other issues around leadership and management. This is wishing you a lovely weekend. Have a nice day and stay safe.